Welcome to Shiloh Ranch. If you are the majority of people who found yourself here as a result of this being the only church that your husband or dad or brother would go to, please understand we sympathize. It's funny, we hear that a lot. People are like, I don't really get it, but like this is the only place my dad will go, or my husband or whatever. So that's you. We're glad you're sticking with us. Hey, and I want to clarify something. I was thinking about this week. I want to clarify something. We're actually not against the church culture, and I know that I don't make a point to clarify that, but I'm really not. In fact, there are big churches that get it right that I really love and I feel really attracted to, and like I love the concept. They do it really, really well. And I want to make sure that I give that as much airtime because I know sometimes, growing up in church, you can be kind of critical, and I don't want that to define how I feel about church. I love when it gets it right. Jacob and I actually were watching this clip of a photographer, and he was trying to capture the culture of stickball in Havana, Cuba. He was down there and he was there for like the week, and just the story of him capturing this photo of telling the story of stickball in Havana, that kind of stuff is my absolute favorite. I love culture. I love, when culture is so clearly defined that it's easy to pick up on. And I think that's, if I was being clear about what it is that if you're watching Shiloh, if you're trying to figure out like, why is this church the way that it is? It's just culture. It's just who we feel called to. It's a little bit different than maybe a traditional model, but we love it. And like I said, it seems to work out for the maybe not best church people. Anyway, we're in a series, and series even work we were here because it's not always like an exact order. And so it's been a couple weeks ago and I preached about the right name, the wrong Jesus. And I just can't get away from that concept. I can't let go of that because it would be so easy to completely miss who Jesus is, but give him the right name. Like say the right name, say the right words, but completely miss the vein or the heart of who he is. And here's why that's scary to me is that if you miss the vein or his heart or his nature, if you miss who God is, it doesn't matter what name you use. There's that verse in Matthew, it goes, we used the right name. And he goes, yeah, but we didn't know each other. And so I'm kind of just circling around that, and I don't know how long I'll stay there, but I want to make sure that I feel like we've gotten clear to the bottom of that concept so we at least understand it. We'll start in Matthew chapter 8, verse 18. It says, when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross to go to the other side of the lake. Then a teacher of the law came to him and said, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus replied, Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. I have heard this verse so many different times. If people are just not really financially in a good position, they go, but it's fine because Jesus didn't even have a house. And that's how they'll justify being broke. And it's also how people will justify people that do really well financially. Like, oh, come off of it. Jesus didn't even have a place to lay his head. What's wrong with you? This verse, it seems like almost, I can't remember one sermon about Jesus not having a place to rest his head that I've ever listened to that didn't feel like some sort of prescriptive element to it of like, well, Jesus did this and, WWJD. And you're like, oh no, I have a pillow. What's wrong with me? Am I not a good Christian? And so I want to dig into it a little bit more. I think this is true about most people. And if you're wherever you're watching or whenever you're watching this, see if this doesn't seem to be right, is that people are okay not being understood. At a general sense, I think a lot of people are okay with not being understood. But almost nobody is okay with being misunderstood. What I mean by that is if somebody goes, hey, I don't really know you that well, not a lot of people feel triggered by that. What triggers people is when someone goes, I know who you are, and then they get it wrong. They'll go, you are so like blank, and you're like, no, I'm not. Almost everybody, that's when you're like, okay, now I have to explain myself. Now I have to get in there and explain what I meant and what I said, and we're okay with not being known, but we're certainly not okay as being known as the wrong thing. Well, that's this whole concept of Jesus is, if we don't know Jesus as one thing, it's when we think we know him that it's just so catastrophic because it decreases our curiosity. We don't feel curious about Jesus. We don't feel curious about the word. We're like, yeah, we got it. We know it. We're in a time where the word racist gets thrown around, recklessly thrown around. And my fear on that is that the weight of that word will actually begin to decrease because the word gets thrown around so often. And when somebody goes, you're a racist, and someone's like, no, I'm not. And it's just this inflammatory sort of a thing that's happening in our culture. Why? Because we don't want to be misunderstood. Nobody is comfortable with being misunderstood. You're always angry. No, I'm not. Why? You don't take anything serious. Yes, I do. We feel like there's an injustice to being misunderstood. There's this injustice to being mistitled or mislabeled that we just can't take. And the second half of that is people also want to be known as their imagined self. You ever know anybody like this? Like they're always projecting to you what they want you to think about them. Like they don't really necessarily know who they are, but they have this image and they're trying to project it. You know, maybe they'll drive a car that reflects the image of who they want to be, or maybe they have the job or the clothes or the friends. This one happens a lot. They want to have the right friends. I don't want to be friends with the wrong people, because if I'm friends with the wrong people, you'll get the wrong image about me. And, you know, some worse than others. I know that not everybody necessarily struggles with this, but it's hard. It's hard to be, think of it this way. It's hard to be friends with somebody who doesn't know who they are, that doesn't have a concept of their own identity, because they're always asking you to participate in, you know, like their role playing. They want you to participate. Like, you say that I'm this way and you say that I'm that way, and they're managing an image and this imagined self versus the reality. And that's really hard for me at a personal level. I'm transparent to a fault. And so the minute someone asks me to participate in this like blind spot, that's a hard person for me to be close with. This one's my favorite. When somebody was born into privilege, super privileged upbringing, wealthy family, tremendous opportunities, and they don't want to accredit their success to that. They're like, I'm a businessman. You're like, I want to play along with your image that you're just wildly successful because you're a businessman, but everyone sees it. We all, like, see what I mean? I don't want to be known as someone who's born into privilege. I want to be thought of as being wily and smart and business savvy. Imagine self versus reality. There's two more. One is when someone's an underachiever. Maybe they're just like lazy or not super ambitious, or they've made bad decisions, or they're reckless with their decision making. And they're like, well, here's why I'm not successful. They don't want to own the reality of their identity. They want to project, well, I was disadvantaged. My choices didn't matter. Maybe I heard a preacher named Irma McManus say it this way, that even if it's not your fault, you are still responsible for you. Even if you're not to blame for where you find yourself, you are still responsible for yourself when you find yourself there. I think that's such a great point. Here's my favorite one. Anytime anybody gets questioned about anything is, I'm a Christian. You can't question me. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. My imagined self as people. And this is actually, here's what's crazy. This is just as prevalent in church as it is out of church. So if you're going, well, these church people, like, wait a minute, this happens outside of church too. No one wants to be questioned. No one likes being questioned. Nobody wants to be called into question for their ethics or their morals or their decision making. Be like, hey, here's how I know I'm good. Here's why I'm good. Back off. So in Matthew 8, it says, when Jesus saw the crowd around him, he gave orders to cross the other side of the lake. Then the teacher of the law. Now, teacher of the law is such an important part, because the law was not Jesus's main focus. It doesn't say this person that was pursuing the heart of Jesus, somebody who loved Jesus. It says somebody who identified, who imagined themselves as a teacher of the. My older brother, my younger brother used to take piano lessons, and I didn't. I think my parents maybe saw it early on. But you could tell, you can still, anyone, whether you know music or not, whether you're a musician or whether you're not, you can tell somebody who is playing a piano according to the rules or according to the laws versus playing the spirit of the music. Like, there are people who play by ear and they get this, the idea, like they're playing along with the basic idea of the music. And then you have people like, you're not doing it right. It's not the rules. The rules say, do, 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 do. And the rules of an instrument will allow you to play the song correctly, but it doesn't land. It doesn't feel the same. You're like timing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Have you ever heard someone with no rhythm at all try to clap according to the rules of clapping? You clap on the 1 and the 3, and they're always off because they're. I grew up in the South. We clap in church, and it's like it sounds like an applause when someone is trying to clap according to the rules of what's going on. And so the teacher of the law comes to him and he said, teacher, which that's already a misidentifying Jesus. That's already mislabeling Jesus. He doesn't come and say Lord or God. He comes to him and says, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. We all know this guy. We all know him. I mean, probably like faces popping in your mind right now. We all know this guy. They imagine themselves as being devout. They are devout. They are committed. I'm not like these other people. Literally, it's like the unspecified point of this whole sentence. He doesn't come out and say it, but what he's saying is, I will follow you wherever you go, not like these other people. So imagine, you can hear it. He imagines nothing's too hard for me. You'll never go somewhere I couldn't go. I'm a true believer. In fact, I'm a good person. My intentions could never be bad because I know I'm a good person. Literally something I saw on Facebook not too long ago. I could never be a bad person because I know my heart. Teacher of the law. I'm a diehard. Actually, what he's saying is, everyone look at me and look at my commitment. Teacher, don't you worry. I'm not like these other people. I'll follow you wherever you go. We know people like this. They come to the church and they're like, well, it's not as much, honestly, this is one of the things I actually love about the culture of Shiloh, is it doesn't feel like social equity to be like power Christian, and maybe that's just some like personal hangover from my youth group days where it was like social equity to be the best Christian. Yeah, maybe that's just a personal thing. Look at me and my commitment. 2-point sermon because it's 2/3 of a sermon. First one is right commitment, wrong God. Like there are times in this right name, wrong Jesus concept where we get the right commitment. Like I'm in. I want my life to look different. Listen, that's why people come to church. That's why people are listening to this. That's why you're tuning in online, is you're listening, and there is this unspoken hope that like maybe life could be better than it is right now. Maybe my decisions could be better. Maybe this concept of God, like maybe I need to be more committed. The commitment is not the problem. It's who you're committed to that is foundationally important that when you make a commitment that you know who you're making a commitment to. I would say if you were to ask, now try to just clear your head. It's going to feel like a trap. Just try to calm down. Just hear me out. There's no punishment. There's also no reward. Just try to play along. If you were to ask the average church-going American if this basically sums up their tenets of faith, ask anybody in an American church today. If you ask them, okay, does this pretty much describe your 7 basic elements of your belief? The belief in the oneness of God, the belief in angels, the belief in revelations or books of God, the beliefs in the prophets of God, sounds good. Belief in the day of judgment, that happens to be one of our favorite ones, especially people who love law. People who love law love judgment. They love it. It's like their favorite thing to think about. Like someday you're going to get it. Like we just like, when we feel wronged or somebody cuts us off in traffic, we're like, God's going to get them. Maybe, is that in the South? Is that as normal? Maybe that's everywhere, but we all have this thing of like, God's going to make this right. I've been wronged, but God's going to, day of judgment. Oh, we love that one. 6, the pre-measurement, like the destiny of God, that God has a destiny in mind for you, and the resurrection after death. If you were to ask the average church person in the American church, sitting in church, does that pretty much sum it up? Maybe you're sitting there going, pretty much, yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Here's the problem. Those are the 7 tenets of the Islam faith. Google it. See? The problem is sometimes we can have the right commitment, but to the wrong God, and we think we're pretty much getting it right. It's basically the same, and we can literally follow the wrong God. Oh, man, you're hating this. I can feel it. I can feel it through the camera, and I'm not even recording it when you're sitting there. I just know it, that you're like, no. That we can have the right level of commitment to the wrong God, and what I mean by that is a God who is not our God. Maybe you've put the same name tag on him, but he's not leading you in the same direction. Aristotle had what was called the law of non-contradiction, and it sounds really basic until you start digging into it. We won't this for the sake of time, but the law of non-contradiction says that if something is this, it can never be the opposite of that. You're like, duh. But that's the nature of God. If God is a God of love that has fulfilled the law, God cannot be a God who says through the law you can fulfill the righteousness. They are completely different. A God that says, do the rules better and you'll earn it. You do this and you, like, the nature of Allah in the Islamic faith is the exact opposite of the nature of who Jesus was according to the word. And so this idea that like, yeah, those are basically my beliefs. Is it scary to think that we could get really committed and miss the entire nature of God's personality? I vote yes. I vote that is terrifying. Then the teacher of the law came to him. I'm reading it again. This is 19. Then the teacher of the law came to him and said, teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus' answer is, like foxes have dens, birds have nests. But what he's saying is, you don't even know who I am. You're going to follow me wherever I go. You sure? You're sure? Yes. This is universal behavior apart from Jesus. We see people that get this level of committed all the time to stuff. Why is it that people can strap explosives to themselves in the name of God and go do something as final as death? Why is that? Because sometimes we can have the right commitment to a God that calls us to what? See how real it just got? Of like, well, how could you condemn somebody if that's what God called them to do? And you go, I don't believe that's who God is. That's the key. That is the entire key right there, is that we can have the right commitment to the wrong God. Jesus goes, how are you going to follow me? You don't even know who I am. It's an impossible question. Like, you're going to follow me, but how are you going to follow me if you don't know who I am? Second point is you can have the right Jesus and have him in the wrong role. And here's what I mean by that. Jesus is like my buddy, my homeboy. Jesus, remember those t-shirts? Jesus is my homeboy. You can have the right Jesus, like God of love, like loving God, the God, but the wrong role, which means he's going to do it and then I'm going to do it. He's going to, remember the bracelets, WWJD, like what would Jesus do? And then you have to do that. You have to do the things that Jesus did so that you can be like Jesus was. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, what was the last part? I will go wherever you go. Do you know where Jesus was headed? He's like, I'll go wherever you go. And Jesus is like, you sure? You're going to go wherever I go? I'll go wherever you go. He's like, I'm headed to the cross. What? No, you're the leader. He's like, no, I'm headed to death. No. See, right Jesus, wrong role. You're not headed to the cross. You're going to lead us. That's my commitment. I'm committed to something that's going to be better for me. My life's going to get better, remember? And you're going to take us, we're going to overpower the Romans. Jesus goes, I'm headed to the cross. And he's like, well, okay, maybe not wherever you go. Maybe my commitment was like to you, Jesus, as like my friend, as my inspiration. There you go. Jesus as my inspiration. Jesus inspires me to be better. Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. I've heard that so many times of like, oh, then am I allowed to have a house? Maybe I should give my house away. Is God going to condemn me because I have a home? And like, see the craziness? Because you have the right Jesus in the wrong role. Was Jesus inspiring us to tell us to do everything that he did the way that he did it so that we can have what he... Do you see how confusing this all becomes when we have the right Jesus, but he's in the wrong role? Jesus did it to show me how to do it. That's an impossible standard. Please take a deep breath and hear me when I say this. Trying to complete everything that Jesus did is an impossibly high standard. You're not going to do it. There's people that like, they're okay with the idea of suffering. Like, okay, Jesus suffered, so I'm going to suffer. Like, but did Jesus call you to go die? To go take people out, to follow these rules and to be militant? Here's the thing. If it's the law of love, if that's what God teaches, that the law of love doesn't require compulsion. That's what government systems that are connected to the cross, and like that's what the Crusades were, is that we connect the law of love to the law of compulsion, and you have to do it this way. And all of a sudden we say Jesus, but we're screaming a faith that actually is Islamic. And you go, are you against Islamic? Well, if it's not true, I guess I kind of am, but not because I want to put it out of business. I just want to make sure that we know who Jesus is. The law of love draws us away from things like the Crusades because he's not calling us to do what he did. He's calling us to understand what he did and in turn what that means for who we are. The Son of Man has no place to rest his head. Jesus said, I have no place to rest my head. You go to John chapter 19, verse 30. Jesus is now on the cross, and turns out the teacher of the law didn't make it. He was alone. I'll follow you wherever you go as long as it's, kind of that way. Jesus is like, I'm going the other way. I'm going to death. I'm going to the cross. And he's like, well, then you couldn't be who I thought you were. Verse 30 says, when he had received the drink, Jesus said, it is finished. Not I am finished. What I'm here for is finished. It's completed. I have finished what I came to do. And then this is such an interesting concept. Because he's just finished saying, I had no place to rest my head. And it says, when he had completed what he came to do, he bowed his head, he rested his head, and gave up his spirit. Jesus goes, you don't even understand why I'm here. You don't even understand what I came to do. I'll follow you anywhere. He goes, I'm going to the cross. And he goes, I can't go there. And Jesus is like, trust me, I of all people know you can't do it. I know. I'm not asking you to be the sacrificial lamb. That's what I'm here to do. I'm not here to like do it first so that then you can do it. I'm here to do it for you. That is a much different Jesus than one who calls us to war and to laws and to rules. And you better. Says he has no place to rest his head. That's not a prescriptive Jesus. Turns out Jesus wasn't who they imagined him to be. The Messiah turned out to be much different than they had imagined him to be. We had imagined he would be this way, and he's that way. He has no place to rest his head. It's not prescriptive. Here's why. We aren't who we imagined ourselves to be. We imagine ourselves to be the solution somehow. We'll be the solution. I'm a businessman. Well, I've had a disadvantage. Well, I'm like, hold on a minute. You aren't who you imagined yourself to be, the teacher of the law. Well, look at me. I'm so committed. And Jesus is like, you aren't who you imagined yourself to be, which is good because I'm not who you imagined me to be. I'll be the solution. I'll give it to you for free because I hate to ruin your ego or your image, but like, you're not going to be the solution. Your self-righteousness, your completion of the rules, as long as I do a little bit more good than I do bad, then I'm going to get in. And Jesus is like, that's Islam again. Oh, yep, that's back. That's the other one. It's not me. That's not my nature. See, right name, wrong Jesus. Jesus is like, hey, you'll do the rules. You'll start playing music on the piano. And when you start playing music on the piano, it follows all the rules, but it's not because of the rules. Music doesn't destroy the rules. Music goes beyond the rules, and your life starts to play this song that draws people in, and you become a reflection of a Jesus that went so far beyond. He gave up his peace so that we could have peace. He went to the cross because he knew that we couldn't. He lived this life because he knew that we couldn't, and it's this exchange. He's going, I gave up my choice. Jesus is saying, I surrendered my choice. Why? So that you could have one. It's an exchange. I'm not who you imagine me to be, but that's good because you're not who you imagine yourself to be. And then the problem is we turn it into this religion of do it this way and do it that way. The rules say, and we start to play this weird religious song that is like, no, I don't want that. I want away from that. I don't want my life to look like whatever rule playing you got going on there. Do it this way, do it that way, then you'll be accepted. When you say yes to Jesus, to follow Jesus, you got to understand you're also saying yes to accepting the death that he completed. I have no place to rest my head destroys the claim that we have to our imagined self. Because Jesus is going, I don't so that you can. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and it's so frustrating. Here's where we're wrapping up. I'm going to be done. I'll follow you is such a virtue claim because you could say that to any God, and then go do whatever you want to do and claim that it's in an effort to follow God. God's going, I'm not asking you to go die for me. I'm asking you to go live as though you already died. That is the fundamental mind-numbing part of Christianity. And instead, it's like we get so mad when Jesus won't honor our imagined self. Jesus, I am not that way. Jesus is leading you into a life that goes away from your imagined self. We get mad. Does God even love me? Does God even know me? I've been guilty of this. How could God know me and then do this? And God's like, no, I know you. You don't know you. You don't know you, but it's okay. I was rejected so that you could be accepted. I was killed so that you could live. I gave up my peace so that you could live. Just trust me. I'm not who you thought I was, but you're not who you think you are either. It's a good trade. The more we dig into that in this weird church, whatever church this is, however this works, what happens is you stick with it long enough, the nature of God that says, why don't, instead of rules, why don't you lean into loving people? The rules kind of always fall into place in moments of love. The rules of what I've called you to, they'll always follow. And I think sometimes we get so committed to a political avenue because a religion of law needs compulsion and it needs political power and it needs enforcement. And Jesus is like, you don't need all that to do what I've called you to do. You don't need all that to be who I've called you to be. You're going to have to kind of like lay down the power on the cross a little bit. You're going to have to give up power because you're not who you imagined yourself to be. Saying that like that's the concept of Jesus is it's not this prescriptive, do it this way, do it that way, and then you'll be good. It goes, I'm this way and I'm that way so that when I give it to you, you can be fully accepted. And you go, well, that I didn't earn it. That means you can quit expecting everybody else to. That means you can give grace to people that don't deserve it or that don't earn it the same way that you got it. Because there's nothing that creates a more militant religious follower than thinking you're getting it right. I'm getting it right, and if I'm getting it right, then you should get it right. And we start playing the rules of the piano. It just sounds angry and mad. And people walk in there like, I don't want this in my life. There's no melody to it. There's no flow to it. And I think that's the key. I'm trying to figure out a way to land this in a way that makes sense. But Jesus goes, no. I'll complete the rules so that you can start to live in harmony with each other and love each other in a way that draws people in instead of pushing people further out. Because not just for other people's sake, for your sake, so that you can understand that you're accepted. Because if you think it's about earning it, you're always aware that you're not earning it. If it's always about being good enough, you're always aware that you're not good enough. It's about accepting what Jesus did that puts you at peace in your own life, that allows you to go boldly to the Father and go, oh, thank you for who you are, because it allows me to come to you as I'm working out this imagined self that just seems to keep getting destroyed. But God, just keep me going. Like, help me to understand where we're going. Help me to understand the difference between who you created me to be and who I've imagined myself to be that just keeps causing me trouble. It's not just peace with each other. It's peace in a life that we need. I think that's what keeps people coming back. I think that's what keeps people going to the Word, is they have those moments and they go, I don't ever want to live without this again. I don't want to ever imagine a life apart from this again. Let's pray. Lord, I pray for our country. I pray for our people. I pray for our culture. Lord, I'm bringing our culture in front of you today and realizing we have gotten so far into the rules and the deserving and the us versus them. God, we've gotten so lost in this culture that says we earned it, why can't you? God, you read this verse about Jesus who had no place to rest his head, and you go, wait a minute. He did that so that I could have a place to rest mine. By resting his head on the cross and accepting what he came for. That's the thing, is that we imagined that the Messiah would be much different, and then you show up and you go completely against our imagined idea of a Messiah so that we can live a completely differently imagined version of self, a self that is completely forgiven, completely loved, completely accepted, apart from the struggles that we all experience. God, help us to lean into the right name, the right nature, the right heart, God, the right commitment to the right Jesus. And the right Jesus in the right role, a God who came and did it for us. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.